Hi there. I'm here to talk about using sign language even if you don't know any deaf people, no deaf friends, you never learned sign language before, there's no deaf people in your family. There's some ways that you can use sign language in your life. And then, first of all, it's fun and um, it's beneficial in some ways that I'll explain. But also, those times in your life when you do meet some deaf people, you'll already have a little bit of sign language you can use, and that's kind of the goal here, is to bridge the gap between deaf communities and the hearing world, so there's not such a big gap, so people aren't like, oh, that person knows sign language because their cousin is deaf, or some situation like that. So the three main situations I want to talk about, you've probably heard of, is baby sign language. So the reason that became so popular is because when your baby's growing, they can use their hands and their eyes to communicate before they have their vocal cords. So before they can say anything. So of course, what do? They cry when their diaper's dirty. They're hungry, they're thirsty, they're uncomfortable, something hurts. So they just cry. And then when you use sign language with your baby, they're able to communicate those things, whatever's wrong, before they can actually speak. So you've probably seen milk, more, mom, dad. So that can be really helpful as a parent when you're trying to figure out why your baby's uncomfortable, why your baby's crying. But that kind of sticks with them. As you know, babies really absorb language when they're young. And then when they have that style of communication, maybe sometimes they're upset and they've already been talking for a couple of years. Sometimes they'll just go into a corner and be quiet and they don't want to talk to you. But maybe they'll sign. They might be over there looking at you because they're mad about something, gotta go to bed, and they might just sign hungry. And maybe they don't want to talk because they're really giving you the silent treatment. But sometimes they will sign hungry, or I want to eat, or I want to drink, or apple. So even after they're able to speak, they still sometimes can use that as a communication tool with you, their parents, with other family members, with their friends. They can have a little secret sign language together too. So I just want to plant that seed a little bit and think about all the different uses where a baby up to a child that's already been speaking even for years might still use sign language to communicate with you as they're still growing and learning and developing their social skills. The second one is still within the family, is between you and your partner. So not every conversation you have with your partner is public, for a good reason, because you're a family or you're a couple and some conversations are private. But when you can do it in sign language, you can do it in front of everybody, and most of the time, it's not going to be a group of people who know sign language. They're not going to know what you're talking about. So that could be an example where there's a couple and they're at a party or a barbecue or work, something, doesn't matter. And you want to have a conversation about, like, hey, that's the thing I was talking about. Maybe somebody's too flirty, or maybe, hey, you're having a bit too many drinks. Tomorrow's a work day, or whatever kind of thing you want to communicate with each other. Sometimes you can sign it. And even if there are people in the group who know sign language, you can kind of shield your sign with your body. You can say, hey, let's go home soon, okay? So if they do know sign language, you can block with your body so only your partner sees it, and you can still communicate. So you don't have to say, like, in front of everybody, hey, honey, I think it's about time to be taking off now. And everybody's like, oh, yeah, there you go again, getting dragged around by your partner. Not that that's a big deal, but sometimes you just want to have that communication private between each other. So that's just kind of a fun thing. Or you can have a full-on argument in front of everybody they don't even know. They might know because your facial expressions if you're getting pretty heated up. But you can say, we've been waiting for 3 weeks for this, and now you just you want to go home early, but you're not going to be saying that when you're having that conversation. But I'm just voicing for you so you understand. But if you think about that, all the different ways you can use it in the home, or maybe you want to say something to your partner and your child is right there, and you don't want them to really understand what you're talking about. And they're sharp. They can understand a lot of stuff. But if you totally resort over to sign language, then they're not picking up some of the vocab you're using with your words, because those stick like a sponge. In time, they'll learn the signs too. If they see the same thing in a certain situation again and again, of course, they'll learn the signs too. But you and your partner can have this, like, basically secret language with each other about whatever you guys want to talk about, whether it's anything, really, stuff that couples talk about. And just imagine like a barbecue environment where everybody's in the backyard. Maybe there's a bunch of kids, there's other couples, or you're out on the town, especially in a place with loud music. That'll come up more in the next kind of topic I want to talk about. But yeah, just think about that. You and your partner, you and your best friend, you and whoever, some person you communicate the most with, learn some sign language, at least about the things that you guys talk about. And then you'd be surprised in how many different situations you can use it. You can also use it to talk when you're really far away. Maybe one person's stuck in a conversation with somebody who's just blabbering away. And, you get the cues, this person's talking too much, or they're talking about work, and I really just want to, like, chill out and, have a barbecue and hang out and have a drink. They might do this, help me, help me out. Or any situation. You can just imagine the different scenarios where you want to communicate with your partner, your colleague, your best friend, and you're a foot away from each other, but you can see each other. Far away, through windows, underwater, all the situations where you can see each other, then you can sign and communicate those things. And then when you have those kind of tools, then there'll be a time when you meet some deaf people, whether it's at work or whether you're out somewhere and you just see some deaf people, and at least you can say a few things, and then right away you just got kind of connected with that deaf community there. They'll be really happy that you learned some signs, and then there's not just that gap between you, like, oh, you can hear, oh, I'm deaf, okay, well, we're just like going to be separated like any other person in the world. But having that little bit of a connection, if you learned any language at all, having that little bit of a connection goes a long way, especially from being an English-speaking American. It's really fun and exciting, no matter where you're from, to bridge that cultural gap through language. So the next one is related to kind of when it's hard to hear. So it can be at a concert or at a bar or any loud place. So the example I used to manage a bar, and sometimes on the weekends there's a really big crowd. So you got the bar, big crowd in front trying to order something. And as the bar manager, I had to take care of birthdays and those kind of events, and sometimes you want to order a round of shots for people. So instead of trying to yell over the crowd, and maybe you can tell my voice doesn't travel very far, I don't know why, just the nature of my voice. But if the music's really loud, I can't really talk for them to hear me. So let's say I want to order, classic one, we order a round of Jägermeisters for birthday shots. And so, I set up with the bartender, said, hey, if it's ever loud and there's a big crowd, I'm going to be using some sign language. So we practiced beforehand a bunch of times, so we got it down. Oops, getting a little sunny here. So this is the sign for a Jägermeister. This is a sign for a shot. So I just kind of get the bartender's attention. Once he sees me, I'll say, it's a birthday party over there. We need 10 shots of Jägermeister. 10, right? Or you can use your fingers if that's easier. But if you don't use the numbers, you can 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, whatever. And that got to be kind of cool. So we started using that for a lot of stuff. They might say like, hey, we have a reservation, later, 8 o'clock, group of 12 people. You think we should set them at table 7? We can have that conversation from the other side of the venue without having to run over and, hey, later we got a reservation, trying to yell. So you get to skip all that. Plus, it's just kind of calming. You can just look at somebody and have some conversation. So we designed for beer, we designed for wine, shots. This is designed for alcohol, but it's also used as the sign for whiskey. There's vodka. And then for the different kinds of beer, we'd say beer B for the kind of beer at this place is called Bintang. So start with B, or is it beer H for Heineken? Or we do this, was a sign for Guinness. It's actually the sign for priest, but you know how Guinness has that white foam at the top? That kind of, you do that right here. It's, to mean Guinness. So anyways, it gets kind of fun. And then based off that, we used to have a bunch of funny conversations about birthdays, a glass of wine. If there's a promotion for wine, then you can just use that sign language. As long as everybody knows at the bar staff, then we can do it. And if you're working in the industry, it really impresses your guests as well. Not that that's the goal, but they'll be impressed with your efficiency, and then they'll be also impressed the fact that you're utilizing the visual language to take care of them, but also just to function as a service industry venue, whatever that may be. So you can just kind of imagine if you start, say you never learned any sign language before, you got a new baby, whether it's your first, second, third, fourth, whatever, and say, okay, with this baby, we're gonna start doing sign language. Or with your 10-year-old who's 10 years old already, you can say, hey, I'm gonna start doing sign language in the house. So it doesn't have to be baby sign language, but for the sake of an example, let's imagine you have a new baby. From the very beginning, you're already saying, hi, beautiful, hey, sweetie, and you're just signing with them. So their eyes, as you know, there's that stage when they're still very small and they start noticing things with their eyes and turning their head a little bit. Then they're going to start watching hands. And so that's going to be imprinted in their head about, okay, that's a way to communicate. They're going to say, okay, that's a way I'm going to be able to say things, because they know they can't talk yet. They see you talking. But once you really empower them with, just this sign, milk, and they usually can't close their fingers all the way like this, just because their hands are all new, and they might do it like this, might do like this, a variation of it. But the important thing is they're communicating on their own, and they get less stressed out, and then they cry less. So that's a cool thing. So say you got your baby, signing with your baby for a few years. They get older. Sometimes they're throwing a fit. They don't want to talk to you because they're mad at you, but they might do a sign and they'll let you know something, what they want to do, and then you can sign back to them, and there was no words exchanged. So that starts to be really, really cool. And again, that sticks with them, that whole ability to communicate without using words. For elementary school teachers, this will also be a big thing you can do in your classrooms. So if you got those years, then later or at the same time, you're using that same language to communicate with your partner in the house, when you're going out, at dinner, at a social event. So you're still using sign language. And then when your workplace, you realize there's a lot of times in the workplace, if you work in an office, it doesn't matter. You don't have to work in the service industry to be using it. There's with your colleagues, with your boss, there's times where you can just have more effective communication if you implement some sign language into your work. It just happens to be the food service industry. There's the servers, there's the bartenders, there's the floor manager, then there's the, everybody who's involved. Sometimes that really helps, that you don't have to talk in front of guests or talk over loud music. And if you do that until until everybody's grown up, and then you still have it in you, somewhere along the lines, you're probably going to have an experience where there's a deaf person right there, and if you have these skills, you can say something to them. You can even say like, hi, most people go, oh, I'm sorry, I don't know sign language, but my kid knows a little bit. And you can just point when they're a baby, we used to do milk, and then that deaf person will really understand what you're saying, even if your signing is not perfect. And then you're going to start to realize that it's a lot easier to communicate with deaf people, where before you just would have froze up and, oh, sorry, I don't know. And you already have some familiarity with it, and you start to sign with them. And that's the whole goal, is to bridge that gap. And as a bonus, it's just effective for the communication in your life, with your family, with your friends, at work. And then the big bonus is with deaf people, you'll be able to communicate with them, and it's not going to be such a foreign thing to you. So yeah, even if you just start with the alphabet and you're spelling everything, learn the basics. Just be careful where you learn your signs from. Make sure it's from either a person who really knows what they're talking about. Don't just pick a random YouTube video, because there's a lot of stuff out there and it's not checked. And so you got to get a good source. There's some good resources out there. Eventually I'll post them in the comment section, some good resources for you. But yeah, give it a shot. It's a lot of fun. When I was traveling in China, when I was trying to talk to a Chinese taxi driver, and I don't speak a word of Chinese and I don't speak a word of English, that was some really, really difficult communication. We're just trying to go to the train station, and I kind of gestured and I got it across. We got dropped off at the wrong train station, but we got dropped off at the train station, so it felt like a bit of a success. On that same trip, I met some deaf Chinese people, and just having a knowledge of a sign language, we were able to communicate a lot more than I could with the hearing taxi driver who doesn't speak English. I could say, oh, hi, I'm American, I came over here to China, if you want to do days, like this in ASL, it's 1 day, 2 days ago, 3 days ago, but you can do something very visual, like when the sun goes up and it comes down, or the sun going across the horizon. You can say like 4 times the sun when it came down. that's kind of the idea, is when you start using very visual things, if you're not using the same signed language. Another kind of funny story, I'll keep it short, was in the UK. They use British Sign Language. So I was traveling over there. I heard about this conference, and I said, "Cool! I don't know any British Sign Language or any British deaf people, so I just wanted to go participate in the conference." And then when we started sharing some signs, the person interpreting was actually a hard of hearing British person. This is up in Scotland. So the person who could hear my English, and then they would sign it to the deaf British people involved, and that was kind of our interpreter. And then we started to realize that some of the signs were the same sign but had a different meaning, and even within the small category of WH questions. So for example, I would say this, for Americans this means where, and then in the UK this means what. So as you can imagine, just for that example, you get a lot of confusion about, like, in their heads, I'm going what, but I'm really saying where. So I'm saying where are you from? And they say, oh. And they say, where are you from? And I was like, what? Because for me that means here they come, kind of like, as a gesture. We do this for here, and they do this for where. So we just kept confusing all those WH words, which is really hilarious. So yeah, on that note, learn some sign language. Learn a couple. Mom, dad, hello. Spell your children's name. Teach them to sign it. They're going to really enjoy it. And then eventually incorporate it into in your family's communication at work or wherever else you wanna start using it. So if you want to learn sign language, especially learn it from a deaf person, so as long as you have that kind of resources available, try to learn from a deaf person who's excited to teach sign language to a hearing person that's willing to learn. And yeah, that's it. Just wanted to give that little shout out real quick. Okay, all right, have a good day.